Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast with Ron and Kristin, where leadership meets entertainment. This podcast features stories with names and certain aspects that have been changed to keep submissions private. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast. Over the past decade, we've heard a lot about IQ versus EQ, emotional intelligence. But with the rise of the remote work environment, adaptability has risen to the top of the list concerning what employers are most looking for. Ron, before we dive into adaptability, we both took emotional intelligence tests, and it's important to note that just because EQ has been around longer, it's not any less important in the workplace than what we're going to dive into, which is adaptability. But we're going to share some of the results of our EQ test, but also some of the questions that we were asked.
Now, if I end up being an EQ genius, is that going to bother you, Kristin?
No, I think I'm right there with you.
Because I think it contributes to your EQ if you know what they're looking for and you lie on the whole thing. But
oh, wow.
no, some of it was challenging. So I am anxious to hear yours. By the way, I sent mine to Kristin, but I've not seen hers, so I'm not sure what's up with that.
Well,
I'm
the one with the printer that actually works right now, so.
That's true. Good point.
Nothing to hide.
Thank you, Kristin, for telling our worldwide
Ron's
audience.
got a bunk printer, so it's on his to-do list once he's actually.
The travel slows down.
Exactly.
I'm getting a printer.
You've been wheels up for months.
All right, so. Oh, I do have a cool story, but for those who aren't familiar, let's lay a little foundation here. EQ is known for emotional intelligence or quotient, since they call it EQ, it's the quotient. Emotional intelligence is the ability to manage both your own emotions and understand the emotions of people around you. The 5 elements are self-awareness, that's basically identifying, the emotions you exhibit. Self-regulation, control impulses. That one's a little tough for me sometimes, Kristin. Motivation. And that's, the more I've been an entrepreneur, I see how powerful motivation, especially self-motivation. Yeah. Empathy, absolutely. Adapting your feelings and behavior to different situations. And social skills. That's where you communicate effectively. So, Kristin, I wanted to tell a story. This is when I first got introduced to EQ. Now, you and I have talked a lot about CEOs, and it's proven that CEOs do not have the highest IQ in the company, but they usually have a very high EQ.
Right.
And it's because they know how to get things done. They know how to adapt to environments. And it's still very impressive. But there was little known about EQ when I was a probation officer. We had this individual, and there was a lot of folklore about this case. He had actually shut down or caused a car dealership to go insolvent. I mean, it's crazy. It was a used car dealership. So what he did is he got into cahoots with a credit union so that this person over the credit union, like the president or whatever they're called, would falsify documents and add on a balloon payment. And I know you know what that is, being in banking.
Right.
So he would tell people, hey, I can get you this new Mustang for $120 a month. He did not bother to tell them that there was going to be a lump sum payment.
Yikes.
At year 5 or whatever it was. So I began to check I knew a little bit about the case. I began to check the records, and I look in his file. And it literally says, now I'm not being politically incorrect, this is what it said. It said that he scored 65 on his IQ test, and he's classified as mildly retarded. That's what it said. So I got really confused. I'm like, how can someone with that classification cause a whole car dealership to close? And, by the way, cause the credit union to go insolvent as well. So, I mean, it was huge. This case was huge. So I'm thinking someone tipped him off in high school and said, pretend you got, mental problems, and maybe he did. But then I pulled his elementary. I started digging. I went on a fishing expedition. I pulled his elementary records. Same thing, same score, almost identical. So finally the day comes that I'm going to interview this guy. And he walks in, and I got to tell you, I would not have known that he had that level of IQ because he had strong EQ. I asked him even a few technical questions about the credit union, and he was able to answer those questions. So his attorney, of course, is trying to get diminished capacity, that he does not have the wherewithal to actually do these types of crimes. But I explained in my report that he was very observant, he was articulate, he answered my questions, and the judge chose to go with me. But I'm going to tell you a side note. This is only because our listeners get to hear this. There was a girl, and I could not, it was difficult to prove, but she was probably 17. She comes to the car dealership, and she says, you know, he starts showing her this Mustang, and he says, I can make sure you're in this Mustang. He tells her mother to wait at the car dealership. He took her down the road. There's a what we called a motel then.
Oh, geez.
They go in the motel, have sex, and he comes back and gets her this Mustang for like $120 a month. Of course, it's got the balloon payment. But then I started finding out he did that numerous times.
Oh, my goodness.
He had that motel close by. And also, when I started interviewing some of the other car salespeople, they said that anytime they huddled up to talk, he would always make this comment, one grenade will get all of you. What he was saying, it's a metaphor, but what he was saying is, I don't want you huddled up, because he knew he was into so much crap that if they figure it out, if they're sitting around gossiping, they're going to figure out what's going on. So he would never let them huddle up and talk. How about that for a cool story?
That is really cool.
Last thing.
What is that?
I moved to South Carolina, true story, and I get just before I was moving to South Carolina, he had made bail. He bailed out. So I reach out to the pretrial services officer in South Carolina. He moved to, I won't say, but it's a beach town. And when I called that pretrial officer, I said, what's he doing to make a living? He said, he's opened a car dealership, a used car lot.
So right next to a motel.
Probably. He's opened another car lot. I went to the judge, and the judge said, well, he's going to be in prison in 2.5 months. Just let it go. So.
Wow. Did they get a discount for the hotel activities?
Well, that's the point. He would use the same line on everybody. He would say, hey, if you go down to the motel with me, sleep with me, I can get you this
But he
car
wasn't truly
for $120.
doing that.
No, they got the same balloon payment as
balloon
everyone
at
else.
the end. Wow.
But we could not prove that this girl was 7. She was borderline and had turned 18 at some point. It just wasn't worth, but you can get them extra points on the sentencing guidelines.
I see.
For sex with a minor. But I couldn't get enough information to go down that road. So.
And that's where people always wonder where all these bank regulations and laws come from. Truth in lending. I had to take training on that every quarter for 20 years. That's one of the reasons you need truth in lending, so you know what you're going to be paying back. So, that's wild. That story is wild.
And that definitely introduced me to, because I thought this guy, I don't mean to be rude, but I thought he's going to come in salivating, wouldn't be able to talk like with that. I did with that score. And I'd already talked to his attorney. His attorney is going, he can't function. So I'm expecting, this image to come in, and he was, he tried to fake it a few times, but you could tell he was faking it.
Yeah. EQ is very powerful. Speaking of, let's jump into our results. And then first, I'll go over a few questions that we were asked, and we can put in the show notes. We'll put the link if you want to take your emotional intelligence test. It doesn't come out with a actual numeric score. It's more or less defining where your strengths are. I did take one though, and it was pretty obvious when I was answering, so I felt like I was cheating, but it did come out and say I ranked very high. But I wanted one that was a little trickier. So this one that will be in the show notes is a little trickier.
Yeah. So, did you notice the redundancy?
Totally. Yes.
It's trying to catch you if you're lying.
Yeah. It'll ask the same question 3 or 4 different ways.
Yeah.
And I made my husband take it last night because I'm not sure. He has a high IQ, but I'm not sure how high his EQ is. It has to be at least moderate.
You found out he's a serial killer?
No, it's actually higher than I thought. But there were a few that we were laughing over. And then the way they worded the test questions, he was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm taking the police personality test again. Yeah. But okay, so a few of the questions that they asked us were, I am very good at identifying the emotions I am feeling. So back to that self-awareness of emotions. I have control over my emotions, the one Ron struggles with. I'm just kidding. You said it. You opened yourself up there.
I did. I do get stressed sometimes. And
me too.
I'm still working on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I regularly donate to charities that help people in need.
Okay, we got to stop right there. It asked that multiple times. Is it trying to see what's it checking there, Kristin? That one threw me a curve.
Right,
because
right.
I thought they're trying to say if I donate, I'm trying to make up for something else. Or
I was thinking they were. Yeah, I was thinking it was along the lines of empathy. And
well, I hope so.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking that's what it was. You actually scored higher in empathy than I did.
Well, I mean, is that a shocker to anybody? Is there anybody listening to this podcast that's surprised?
You know what was interesting, though, on that? One of the things it asked was, I am very affected by advertisements about animal cruelty. And it made me think of the Sarah McLachlan commercial when it's like, the arms of an angel. Oh, my gosh. Gets me every time.
Okay, but you know what I had to do? I had to go middle of the road because I always change it real fast before I
do
see
too.
that.
Oh,
so
my
I don't
gosh.
even know. I don't know what Sarah was doing. I saw like a dog with one leg or something, and I just hurry and change it.
I know, or its eyeball hanging out of its socket.
Yeah, I didn't
know.
My
son asks me about that sometimes. He's like, why do they play it to make you sad? I'm like, to pull at your heartstrings, to pull at your wallet.
Hey, it's horrible. There's a meme goes around that's got Sarah that pretends they're there. It's
oh my gosh.
It's funny.
I haven't seen that one.
It's not making fun of the dogs. It's making fun of her.
Right. But that one does get me. So that got me some empathy points, I feel like. It also talked about, I really enjoy socializing. I do. So what was yours on that, Ron? I'm curious.
I'm somewhere middle road there, Kristin.
Yeah.
I'm very particular who I socialize with.
That's the same with me, right?
Like, I don't just... It's difficult for me. Like, all these things pop up on Facebook, these events, and I'm interested, but yet, unless I've got someone going... I just don't
I'm the same. I have really worked on saying no to things and only going to what I truly want to focus on. And so it's like, I do enjoy. Once I'm there, I really enjoy myself, but it's just getting me there. That's like, This one, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. I consider myself extremely lucky to have the life I do. For me, I feel very blessed with the life I have, but it's not because it just landed on my lap. I consider it, I'm getting out what I've put in. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Kristin, I think you're accurate on that. I basically you got to understand, I train on this stuff. So I just left where I was training on body language, voice inflection, baton gestures, the way you move your hands, and your ability to read another person's emotion. I explained to them emotions change moment by moment. It's not like other things where, check back in a week. Someone's emotions can change on the spot. I remember providing corrective feedback to someone, and they literally dropped their head all the way down. They looked at the floor for honestly, it felt like 5 minutes. They were not even looking at me because they were ashamed.
Yeah.
So that causes me to overthink these things a little bit. So I do put some sticky notes on my mirror. You didn't know that? I put one on my daughter's mirror the other day. So I consider myself, I'm not a motivational speaker, but I'm a motivating person. So I just felt like gratitude is so important that it probably clouded my answer, because I think you're right on the approach.
Yeah. And this is one where they asked it 3 different ways, 3 different times, and it was the same thing. And I didn't like the wording, because I did feel like it's, you just rolled the dice and this life lands in your lap. And I'm like, not so much. If I'm thinking about it, I have parents that are still alive. I have parents that are healthy, right? Like, there's some aspects that I'm not controlling that outcome. So there's maybe a little bit of luck. I hate to even use that word there, but anyways, I didn't like that question. And
so
body language.
Let's carry on.
Yeah. So quite, a lot of the same, I would say, on the questions.
I'll tell you what we should do. Why don't we screenshot and let's put ours in the show notes. And if anyone's curious, because like you said, it's not like there's a score we can read.
Right. But what's funny, Ron? So you came up very high in other awareness of others. Like, that is your number one. And I thought that was really interesting, even more than self-awareness, actually.
there are different levels of EQ, and the people who, when I talk about personality characteristics, and I'm going to get into that sometime, but there's the driver, and you and I are both driven, and we've talked about it before. The driver, if they can broaden their horizons and express empathy and read the room and read other people's body language, it gives them such a leg up. And I absolutely, Kristin, when I got, and I don't mean this boastful, but when I got elected chair of the Federal Law Enforcement Training Accreditation Board, I'm talking everybody, FBI, Secret, everybody's at this table, and I'm the head. When I first went on, and I only went on because my agency had a seat, and I got the position, so it wasn't like, I did something grand. So I'm feeling a little insecure. I'm sitting here with the FBI Academy Director, ICE Academy Director, Secret, But I just continued to be myself, and I would read the room. I would make fun of them. I'm sarcastic. I don't care who they are. They can be the head of the FBI or anybody else. I'm going to do my sarcasm. I can't help myself. So I began doing that, and all of a sudden I got a call one day, and it's the guy from ICE, and they said, we want you to run for second chair. So I was stunned because I'm thinking, me? But I know now it was all about EQ. Now you gotta have a baseline of knowledge. You can't be an idiot, but I'm saying,
right,
because I had fun, because the people who actually do the assessments, I would go over and check on them and talk to them, and I think that had a lot to do with it. And I ultimately, became chair. And a guy that ran against me, I won't mention the federal agency, but this guy that ran against me, he was a total showboat. There's no doubt he was smart. There's no doubt. I mean, he wore the cufflinks and all this, and he ran against
monogrammed
me. And Kristin, I was uncomfortable because it's an election. I'd never done that before.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I believe me, again, I'm talking about adaptability and EQ here, but he got one vote, and I got every single vote on the table. Yeah, I was even wishing he got a few votes because when they're calling up these, it was, of course, they didn't say the name, but they told the number. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's like painful. Even though you want to win, you want those votes, it's painful to feel that. Because someone with a high EQ, with being able to feel how others feel, that just, I know how that is. You can feel it, and it feels icky.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting, Ron. I got the poet, and which I'm like, I'm so not poetic. I'm not writing sonnets in my free time. But my emotional intelligence superpower is having a rich emotional inner world, good at deeply exploring my feelings and ideas, understanding complex experiences, and describing my emotions vividly. And I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting.
I scored 100% in self-awareness and other awareness, 96 in well-being, 64 in empathy.
Now you're wanting me. What did I score in empathy? Do you have mine in there?
You have, let's see here,
Empathy,
75. Yeah.
Other awareness, that was my highest, 94. And I knew that was going to happen because I'm extremely observant, especially since I took all this body language training and all that stuff. So, all right. You ready to move on?
Let's move on.
We've said this a little bit, but high EQ overlaps with strong interpersonal skills, especially in the areas of conflict management and communication, which are crucial skills in the workplace. The people with a high IQ, they think objectively, and I've said this over and over. If you get over into emotional-based decisions or emotional-based leadership, you will exaggerate. You'll be going, you always do this to me. You never.
Totally.
And, we've talked about that before. So the people, I love to see a high EQ leader walk in the room and just take charge and get things done,
Yeah.
They avoid impulse decisions. Don't say a word, Kristin. Now, in comparison, IQ is a measure of your ability to solve problems and think logically. They use logic to solve problems, plan and strategize, understand abstract ideas, learn and adapt to change, grasp, and use language. Now, imagine someone, Kristin, that has strong EQ and IQ. They're a force to be reckoned with. And I actually have a friend who I call him little Elon Musk. He was one of the top 20 tech influencers in the United States. He's like that. If you met him, you would never know.
Powerful.
And he's got an IQ that's off the chart.
That's amazing. Yeah, that is incredible when you have both, because that's it almost like a unicorn doesn't necessarily, it exists, but it's very difficult to find. Unicorns don't exist, just in case anyone was curious. So historically, IQ test scores have been linked to better academic performance, higher salaries, and a better job performance. But newer studies have raised questions about those conclusions. And luckily for me, EQ, and I'm saying that because I've actually never taken an IQ test. I went to community college. I didn't have to take SATs for that, so I don't necessarily know where I stack up. But I can just tell you, when it comes to EQ, I'm extremely high. When it comes to IQ, I'm going to say I'm just a good, solid mediocre. Just being that's my self-awareness, folks.
That is.
So...
Your high EQ is telling you have a low IQ. I got it.
Mediocre.
mediocre, sorry.
You know, just fair to Midland, as
must be
some
my
of my customers.
Must be my earphones. Go ahead.
So there's also evidence that emotional intelligence may help you handle stress better. And a high EQ can help you recover more quickly from stress. So I think that's amazing. And really, you can raise, this is what's also awesome, is you can raise your EQ level through training.
Yes, you can.
I do feel like some people are just born with a baseline, but if you're not, you can learn some of these attributes. And you can do training through teamwork training, conflict management abilities, your job performance, your general job satisfaction. There's training that you can do that will impact all these different areas. And there's even, I didn't dive into these too much because I wanted to stay on topic, but there's even spiritual intelligence and physical intelligence that are coming to the surface. I'll leave that to you to look into. I don't think I'm going to do too much research, especially on the spiritual end, because I'm not sure if they're talking crystals or what they're, but I thought that was pretty interesting. And Ron, I know you're the training guru. What are your thoughts on being able to train EQ?
I definitely think it's possible. Let me tell you why. I knew someone, I've been guilty, of not having a two-way conversation before, but I knew someone that always talked about themselves. So I literally said, hey, you're not going to be accepted because you're not learning anything about anyone else. You talk about yourself all the time. And this is a person that was, I call it a poser, a brown noser. They wanted me to promote them, so they're always coming in to impress me. And it was so over the top that I knew it. And I talked to them, and I will tell you, it might have been fake for a while, but they changed, and they started really getting to know their teammates. And I think, as we said, fake it till you make it. I've heard people say, don't ever say that, but sometimes it's true.
Yeah.
But this person did improve their intercommunication skills, and it was nice to watch. The other thing, Kristin, I do this fun thing. I'm hesitant to share this because I know that a lot of people I train. Well, I just know a lot of people that I go train listen to the podcast. So, but what I have people do is face each other and then turn back to back. One person faces one wall, the other person faces the other. They're back to back. And then I say, people facing this wall, tell your partner what color their shirt is and be as descriptive as you can. And then I say, how many got it right? They raise their hand. Then the other group, the other person does it. Then you do the pants, shoes, whatever. The point of that is we've developed a whole society that doesn't pay attention anymore. I'm guilty. We're on cell phones. We're not looking around.
Right.
And I'm trying to bring that awareness that you have to be deliberate with your staff in that moment you're with your staff. And that's one of the questions I ask. When you're with your staff, are you with your staff?
Right. Yeah. That's amazing. I feel like I've mentioned this recently, but my dad comes over once a week. And the other day I actually looked up, because I'm always so busy and he's helping me out with things around the house. We call it Fix It Friday when he comes over. We have things for him to fix around the house. I actually looked up and I was like, you have really green eyes. And here it is. This is my father, right? I should know this. But I'm so busy. I'm not taking the time to stop and look him in the eye while we're talking. We're going from A to B, working on things. And I felt, wow, what a shame that I'm just now realizing that.
That's a great story. And Kristin, we're gonna get into what adaptability. We'll just be brief on this if you're still with us. But I wanted to tell you a quick story. this happened in the late 80s or early 90s. This kid was terrible in school. Basically, the teacher said he's going to flunk out and all this. He ends up taking the SAT, the college entrance exam, because they had to. He scores like 1460 out of 1600 on this exam. All of a sudden, he's got the attention of the schools, colleges, all this stuff. And he goes on to be very successful. He started his own, it was like photo printing business back then. And he's very successful. Well, he gets a letter years later, and through an audit, they found out there was 13 people in this year that this happened to with SAT. There was a record problem. It turns out he had made about 760, exactly what he exhibited in class. And they had sent him the wrong score.
Oh, can you imagine?
No, but think about this. His confidence boosted.
Right.
He's like, oh my God, I'm a genius. And he goes out and he's successful. And that's why I think it's so important to motivate people, identify their strengths and help them get to the next level. Because if you believe it, you can attain it.
I 100% believe that. And I've been guilty of looking at someone's positive attributes so much that it blinded me from areas that they need work on.
Yeah.
Especially if they're a pleasure to have around. Let's be honest. That can be.
Yeah.
That can put blinders on you sometimes.
I love the story about your dad's eyes. I got to tell you, that's a great story. I might use that in my next training.
Yeah, by all means. I felt just really bad because I see him once a week.
Yeah.
And wow, that was sad for me to have that realization. And now I make a point to stop and look up when he's talking to me, because one day he won't be there for me to do that. So that's my learning. I want to pivot into adaptability in the workplace. So before we discuss the actual workplace, last night I was making apple pie, homemade, made my own crust, and I foobarred the crust somehow for the top. And I couldn't get it to roll out flat enough to cover the entire pie. And I'm making it for my class of 7th graders because we're finishing up our Americana series. And so I thought, what's more American than apple pie? So that's the whole point there. But I screwed up that dough. So I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Within seconds, I was like, all right, I can't get it to roll flat enough to cover the entire pie. I'm going to go grab one of those little plastic medicine shooters, little round top there, and I'm going to punch out little holes, and I'm going to do polka dot apple pie. And it looks awesome. You would think it was intentional. And then when I serve it tomorrow, I'm going to pitch it as polka dot apple pie. Like, that was 100% intentional. That is adaptability in one way, right?
It really is.
Some people would have gotten in the car and driven to the store and got a Pillsbury rollout, right? They just couldn't handle the fact that it didn't go as planned.
Kristin, you had me at foobarb.
Like,
by the way, if you're listening,
you didn't hear anything else after foobarb.
I saw that on the notes, and my computer goes, "This is probably a misspelled word. This
like,
word
nope.
is potentially misspelled." That's what it says. Anyway, but
You're
the
like,
next
no,
time
she
I'm
put it
out
down
foobarbing, I'll know.
Foobarb.
I'll know what it is.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, it's screwing something up beyond recognition, basically. That's what it stands for.
Let's delve into
pie. Right? Let's acknowledge my adaptability with my apple pie.
No, I'm impressed. And if I were, you're saying it's the most American, I would have done hot dogs, of course, because I can't make pie.
I can't roast hot dogs in the middle of a classroom. That's
true.
The thing.
All right.
Anyhow.
So this is what adaptability looks like. And I'll just throw a few of these over to you in a minute, Kristin, but we've talked about some of this. Can respond quickly to changing demands and priorities, and I think the rhubarb just showed that. The opposite.
It was apple, just so you know.
Oh, I'm getting
rhubarb.
Hungry. I'm getting
rhubarb. I had rhubarb. Oh, foobarb.
I don't want to show
like
off my
rhubarb
IQ
pie.
Here. Rhubarb. Oh, God.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry. The opposite is inflexible or rigid people have difficulty coping with new situations or conditions. And I hate to see someone that just can't handle pressure. They're not going to be a leader. Resourcefulness, and you just really described that with the apple pie.
Yeah.
Determination. And we talked about that, you got to ignite your passion. You have to do something that keeps you passionate. And this determination is like, it's kind of the same as resiliency. It's, even if you do get knocked down, you get back up. And that's where sometimes, I believe that part, when you ask me about can you shape EQ, mold EQ, I think that's the part right there. Is you can help people get more determined.
Right.
You can help them believe in the mission of the company. You can talk to them about their strengths, and it helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Analytical skills, again, that one is borderline with IQ. I think it's more similar and more valuable employee. When I was in accreditation, Kristin, you have level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4 reviews. And I don't want to get too deep, but Kirkpatrick, an individual by the name of Kirkpatrick, developed this. And level 1 is literally just like a quiz, at the end of training. So that gets your level 1 feedback. And then level 1 is the eval, the old-fashioned, this is what I liked about the class. Level 2's a quiz. Level 3 is a lot more significant. It looks at your records, your processes, your policies. But level 4 is new, and it's impact. Like, what kind of impact are you having? And it's more subjective than the others, of course.
Right.
But I think it's very powerful, and I liked when they put level 4 in there. Better leader, we know that. Better equipped to face challenges, we've said that. Now this I thought was interesting. I want to get your input. It says you'll be happier. Changes cause stress, and if you can't adapt, you're not going to be happy. What's your thoughts on that, Kristin?
I agree. I feel like this was always something I did with my team. When something would roll out that would really rock our world, or even just cause us to have to revisit a process, I would allow the group to gripe 5 to 10 minutes, complain about it, right? And then we would say, okay, now let's put a plan of action into place. And because of that, because one, you're working through some emotions as a group and you're being allowed that. And then two, because we're actually taking the time to say, okay, it is what it is. Let's move forward and put a plan in place. And we're not going to just sit there and think about how frustrated we are about it. It frees up mental space, and therefore you're not taking it home with you because you've already started the steps of working towards a solution.
Yeah. There's a term of being the best version of yourself, and that certainly plays a role in it. This one, now I do have to brag a little, but it might be immaturity, so our listeners can judge. You'll be more relevant. Ongoing technology changes will require willingness to embrace new ways of doing things. Workplace systems, new tools or business strategies, apps, all of those things. Well, I prided myself as Academy Director. I would always try to learn more, and it wasn't uncommon for me to show someone how to do this app or that app. Now, there were people superior to me, but I always tried to hold my own. I always tried to use, some of the lingo. I tell Kristin that I'm transgenerational, that I flow back and forth, in between generations. But
oh my goodness,
it does make you respected. And I remember old leaders would make fun of Facebook or anything else. And it just, it literally, you're telling people around you that I'm out of touch.
Right.
Touch. Or back in my day.
Oh, totally. Well, there were managers that were older than me. We were all branch managers, and they would literally have their employees put their cell phones in a bag when they walked into the bank in the morning. And I thought, you know what? How completely, to your point, out of touch are you? That is someone's lifeline. And as long as you set clear expectations and enforce that they're not using it during business hours, why do you have to do that? So I felt like that caused a rift between their younger employees and themselves.
It does.
And they even looked out of touch to me as their peer. So you have to think about those things.
You can make your point using humor, like, at least you didn't have to stop and water a horse while you were doing it.
Yeah, got to be careful with those.
All right.
All right. So how to become more adaptable. So it's important to get out of your comfort zone, put yourself in new situations, and the more you do it, the better off you're going to be. And we've talked about this quite a bit in recent episodes. Be a better listener. Actively listen. even look someone in the eye when they're talking to you that you see every day, right? That you see frequently. Take that time to take them in as they're talking to you. Ask questions. Ask your coworkers how they perform certain tasks. I always did that, as humbling as it was, when I had a peer who performed better than me, maybe in an audit or some other area of my role. I would go to their branch and observe them. I wanted to know how the best handled their day-to-day functions. And that shows a lot about personal growth also, when you can kind of put your ego to the side and learn from somebody. And something else that I'm a huge proponent of is be willing to make mistakes. Mistakes can be disheartening, but provide you with various opportunities, such as the ability to learn a valuable lesson. And it'll tell you a lot about yourself, the way you handle a mistake.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think pride was a little bit of a problem for me sometimes, and I worked on it because I would be more hesitant than you probably to go. It depends if I like the person. If it's someone I liked, I'd go learn from them. But if I didn't like them, I didn't want to learn from them.
Yeah, well, that did play a role for me. I remember once I did go observe this person who I just did not like them.
Yeah.
And I went and observed, and I was very surprised. She didn't even touch any of the functions in her entire store. She just had her minions doing every little aspect of it, and they didn't like her. So it was actually kind of reconfirmed what I already knew. So that one played out differently than expected.
All right, Kristin, let's put a cap on it here.
All right.
If you want to improve your emotional EQ and you want to live a better life, you want to make people around you better, find the positive. There's always something positive that you can find. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm pretty under the weather right now, and Kristin knows it. And I texted her to say, can we record tomorrow? Of course, she said, absolutely not. Suck it up. And no, we could not find a time to record.
That's my lack of empathy speaking.
Yeah. So I'm here. It's not, I don't mean that heroic, but I'm saying sometimes, the show must go on, as they say.
Adaptability.
Learn from your coworkers. You talked about that. Find balance in your life. This is another one, Kristin, that I struggle with. I work too much. I've always been that way, and I'm trying to decompress from that a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then practice emotional intelligence. Make sure you remain in control of your emotions and be aware of the emotions of others around you. If you see yourself, being a hothead, and I use this example, I had, I've already used this in a podcast, but I've seen people who are so furious, but then the phone rings and they answer the phone and they're fine. So that shows they have emotional control. They just don't want to.
Right.
So you can practice, even from mindfulness training, where you don't let yourself get too nervous, with public speaking and other components of your life. Oh, Kristin, this was so much fun. This is a topic that I've been interested in for a long time, and I'm so glad we delved into this.
Yeah, same. And I'm glad we touched on adaptability the way we did, because the workplace has definitely changed over the past 3 years, and understanding why that is number one, it completely makes sense. Yeah.
Kristin, you made me laugh. Last week, we had some fun at the end, and you said if anyone is still listening. So, that was pretty funny.
I like it.
Kristin, we've had a lot of good response on the planner. I think we're going to have some more reviews coming. I was pretty persistent in the last training in promoting the podcast, and I had some people telling me that they couldn't wait to listen, and I felt like they were serious about that. So
it's amazing. Thank you.
I do think this the planner and the podcast are both totally cool and relatively new, and we'll be promoting
keeping you relevant, actually.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Any final words, Kristin?
Mm-hmm. No, it's been a great episode, and we will see you next week.
Yes, be the leader you're meant to be.
The Dirty Side of Leadership podcast is brought to you by Forward Operations. If you'd like to book Ron or Kristin for speaking events, training, or executive coaching, visit forwardoperations.com. Be the leader you're meant to be.